When most
Rehearsals
people
became
first saw Sydnie
unpredictable,
Christmas step onto the
performances
stage of
required
Britain's Got
calculation
Talent,
and
they
fear.
saw
Her
confidence,
digestion was
elegance, and a
unstable,
voice
her
that seemed
energy
fully formed.
unreliable, and
The
the physical
television moment
symptoms
felt
began to
magical,
spill into
almost
how she
cinematic,
looked.
as if
Her weight
success had arrived in a
fluctuated
single evening.
constantly. She
But
would gain
televised
several
triumphs
pounds
rarely
quickly,
reveal the
lose
years of
them, then
uncertainty,
gain them
doubt,
again.
and quiet
Her
endurance
face would
that shaped
swell.
them. What
Costumes
unfolded under
stopped
the
fitting
spotlight was
properly.
not the beginning of
In
her
an
story.
industry
It was the
obsessed with
culmination of a
appearance,
long and
this
often
alone
painful
was
journey.
devastating. But
This
the
is not
physical
just a tale
pain was
about
only
competition
half the
women.
story.
It is an exploration of
Slowly,
persistence,
the illness
health
began
struggles,
to affect her
identity,
mind.
and the complicated
Sydnie
path of a
developed
performer who nearly
anxiety
walked
and
away before
depression,
everything changed.
accompanied by a
In
heavy mental
documentary
fog
fashion,
that made
looking
even
back at her
simple
journey offers
decisions
something more
exhausting.
meaningful than a viral clip.
She described
It
herself as
reveals how
miserable,
resilience develops when no
temperamental,
one is
and
watching,
emotionally
how
drained.
setbacks can quietly redefine
Eventually,
ambition,
she was
and
prescribed
how personal healing
antidepressants,
sometimes
not
becomes
because
the
the world had
foundation for
collapsed
public
around her,
success.
but because her body had been
Understanding that
quietly
fuller
breaking
picture
her
gives
spirit
depth
from
to a
the
moment
inside out.
many assumed was
Still,
simply
she kept
overnight
going.
fame.
She appeared on
Long before
stage
she became
school,
known to
giving
national
viewers a glimpse
audiences,
of her
Sydnie
talent,
Christmas
while
was growing up
privately
in
struggling to
Gravesend,
keep herself
Kent,
functioning.
a town close
She
enough to
continued
London to
working
feel
on cruise
opportunity
ships,
nearby,
pushing through
yet distant
shows
enough
while
to
her
make
health
creative success
deteriorated.
uncertain.
At one
Her
point,
childhood
she
was
tried
not built
changing her
around red
lifestyle
carpets or
completely,
industry connections.
adopting a vegan
It was
diet for
grounded in
several
ordinary
months in
routines,
hopes that it might
family
help.
support, and an
Instead,
early,
it made
natural
everything
connection to
worse.
music.
Her energy
Relatives
disappeared.
later described
She
how she
survived
sang
largely on
instinctively,
pasta,
not as a
unaware that
performance,
the
but as
very
something that
food
felt
she
woven
relied
into her
on was likely
personality.
fueling her
Music
suffering.
was less a hobby
What
and
made
more a
this
language
period
she
especially
understood without
tragic
instruction.
was how
Yet her
normalized
upbringing
the
was
pain
balanced.
became.
She was
Sydnie
active,
convinced
energetic,
herself that
and
this was
competitive,
simply what adult
even
life felt
participating
like.
in sports
That
during her
constant
teenage
discomfort
years.
was normal.
That physical
That
strength would
exhaustion
later
was part
become a
of the
sharp
job.
contrast
Her
to the health
body was sending
challenges she
signals,
faced in
but she had
early
learned to
adulthood.
ignore them,
At the
believing
time, though, her
perseverance was
focus
the
was
same as
forward-looking.
strength.
She
By the
dreamed
time she reached her
realistically,
mid-20s,
understanding that
her
talent
career
alone would
felt
not carry her.
stalled, her health felt
Training,
broken,
discipline,
and she
and
had no
resilience
clear
would be
explanation
required
for
if she
why
hoped to
everything
build a
felt so
career in
hard just to
performance.
survive.
Determined
And
to
yet,
pursue the arts
the
seriously,
real
she
cause was
enrolled
still
at the
hiding in
D&B
plain sight.
Academy of Performing Arts, an
The
institution known
diagnosis
more
that
for
came
discipline
too
than
late.
fantasy. Training there
The
demanded
turning point in
consistency,
Sydnie Christmas's
technical
life did
precision,
not
and
arrive with
emotional
applause
stamina.
or opportunity.
Students were not simply
It
encouraged
came
to dream.
quietly
They
in
were
a doctor's
expected to work
office,
relentlessly.
years after her body
Sydnie
had been
immersed
pleading
herself
for
in
answers.
acting, singing, and
After nearly a
dance,
decade of
understanding that
pain,
versatility would
exhaustion, and
increase her
emotional
opportunities.
collapse, a
Those years were
GP
formative.
finally raised a
They
possibility
shaped her
no one had
professionalism
seriously
and
considered
strengthened her
before:
belief that performance was not just
gluten
passion but
intolerance.
vocation.
It
Yet
sounded almost
graduation
too
marked the
simple
beginning of
compared
a
to the
harsher
scale of what
reality.
she had
The
endured.
transition from training to
Bread,
professional work can be
pasta, wheat,
disorienting.
barley,
Auditions are
rye,
frequent, but stable
foods she had
roles are
relied on
rare.
daily,
Rejection
might be
becomes
the source of
routine.
everything.
Early in her career,
The
she
suggestion was
experienced both
cautious,
excitement and
almost
instability.
experimental.
Each
She
opportunity
was
felt
advised to remove
significant,
gluten
yet
from her
none
diet
guaranteed
for a few
security.
weeks, then
It was
reintroduce it
during
to
this
observe the
period that
difference.
she began to
Sydnie
understand how
agreed,
unpredictable
not
the
expecting
entertainment
much.
industry can be.
After so many failed
Success was
attempts to fix
possible,
herself,
but rarely
hope had
linear,
become
and
dangerous.
often dependent on
But within 2
endurance as much
weeks,
as skill.
something extraordinary
One of
happened.
her early
The
professional
pain
highlights came with
stopped,
her
the bloating
involvement in
disappeared,
Lazarus,
her
a
energy
production built
returned.
around the
For the
music
first
of
time in
David
years,
Bowie.
she felt awake
The
inside
project
her own
offered
body.
credibility and
The change was
exposure,
so dramatic it
signaling that her
stunned her.
training was
She came off
translating into real
antidepressants.
opportunity.
She lost about a
However,
stone without
theater work can
trying.
be
Her
temporary by
weight
nature.
stabilized. The
Contracts
mental
end,
fog lifted.
productions close,
She later
and
described
performers
it as
must
getting her
immediately
old
seek
self
the next
back,
role.
the person she had forgotten
Following this,
existed.
Sydnie worked on
The
cruise
doctors
ships and
explained that
demanding
when the
stage
gut is
productions,
unhappy, it
performing
affects
night after
everything:
night in high-energy
mood,
shows.
hormones, mental
Cruise
health,
entertainment offers
energy.
valuable experience,
Suddenly,
but
the
requires
years of
stamina,
suffering made sense.
adaptability, and
Yet this
emotional
relief
resilience.
came with a
The
cruel
applause each evening can
technicality.
be uplifting,
To
yet the
receive a formal
lifestyle is
diagnosis
transient.
of celiac
Long contracts
disease,
away from
Sydnie would
home,
have needed to
constant
consume
travel,
gluten
and
again
physical
for
strain
weeks
become
so
part
her
of daily
body could
life.
produce
From the
detectable
outside, it may
antibodies.
appear glamorous.
After what she had
From
been
the
through, she
inside, it
refused.
requires endurance.
She was unwilling to return to
During this
pain
time,
just to put a
Sydnie
name on it.
continued pushing
In
forward
daily life,
professionally.
she
What
describes
few people
herself as
realized
gluten
was that beneath
intolerant.
the demanding
In
schedule,
restaurants, she
her
says
body had
celiac
begun
so people
sending
understand the
signals that something
seriousness.
was wrong.
It is not
Around
exaggeration.
the age of
Even a small
19,
amount
she
of gluten
started
now leaves her
experiencing
unwell.
persistent stomach pain.
This
Initially,
realization
she
carried a
attributed it to
quiet
stress,
grief.
fatigue,
She wondered
or
how
irregular
different her life
schedules
might have
common in
been if
performance
someone
work.
had noticed
Many
earlier.
young professionals
How many
normalize discomfort,
auditions, performances,
exhaustion is
and
simply part of
opportunities
ambition.
were lost
But the pain
not
did
to
not
lack of
fade.
talent,
Instead,
but to
it
an invisible
intensified.
illness no one
Mornings
could
became
see.
unpredictable,
By the
with
time her
nausea and
health
bloating
finally
severe enough to
stabilized,
disrupt her day.
years had
Some
passed.
days she struggled to
Her
leave her
career
room.
momentum had slowed,
Yet she continued
and the stage that
rehearsing,
once felt
performing,
within
and
reach
auditioning.
now
In
seemed
industries
farther
where
away than
reliability
ever.
is crucial,
That was the
admitting
moment
vulnerability
Sydnie
can
faced a
feel
brutal
risky.
truth.
She learned
She
to
could keep
manage
chasing a
quietly,
dream that had
masking
already
discomfort
cost her
with
so much,
professionalism.
or she
Over
could step
time, her
away and
symptoms
accept a
expanded
quieter
beyond
life.
physical pain.
For a
Energy
while,
levels
it seemed like the
fluctuated.
dream was
Weight
slipping out
shifted
of her hands
unpredictably.
entirely.
Costumes fit differently
The
from one
year she
contract
nearly
to the
gave
next.
up.
In a field often
By the
attentive
time
to
Sydnie
appearance,
Christmas
these
decided to
changes added
audition for
emotional
Britain's
pressure.
Got Talent, she
The
was not
struggle
living the
remained
life
largely
people imagine
invisible
of
to
a future
colleagues and
star.
audiences.
Her health
But
had finally
internally, the
improved,
uncertainty
but her
grew.
career had
Something
stalled.
deeper was
The
unfolding,
years of
and it would
illness
take
had
years
interrupted
before
her
clarity
progress at
arrived.
critical moments,
As physical
leaving gaps
symptoms
that are
persisted, their
unforgiving in the
emotional
entertainment
impact deepened.
industry. She
Chronic
was no longer
discomfort can
touring.
gradually
She was no
influence
longer
mood,
consistently
focus, and
performing.
self-perception.
To support
Sydnie
herself, she
later
took a job
described
as a
feeling mentally
receptionist at a
foggy,
gym.
anxious,
There was
and
nothing shameful
increasingly
about the work,
discouraged.
but it
When health
symbolized
remains
something
unresolved,
painful.
even small
This was not
setbacks
where
can
she
feel
thought she would
overwhelming.
be after
She
years of
sought medical
training,
guidance
theater
multiple
work,
times,
and
yet early
professional
consultations
experience.
did not provide
Singing,
definitive
once her
answers.
identity,
Without
had
a clear
quietly
diagnosis,
disappeared from
it
her
becomes
life.
easy to
She had not
internalize
sung
frustration.
publicly in
She
years.
began to
The
question her
voice that once
resilience,
defined her had
wondering why
become
maintaining
something she
momentum
almost
felt so
avoided,
difficult.
as if
At
using
one
it
point,
again would reopen
antidepressants were
wounds she
prescribed
wasn't
to help
sure had
stabilize her
healed.
mood. While
When she
mental health
finally filled
support
out
is
the
vital
audition
and
form,
valid,
it
the
wasn't
root
driven
cause
by
of her distress
confidence.
remained
It was
unclear.
driven by
The
exhaustion.
connection between gut
Britain's
health
Got
and
Talent
emotional
felt like a
well-being is
final
now more
door.
widely
If
understood.
it didn't open, she
But at
was
the time,
prepared to stop
she was
knocking
navigating
altogether.
uncertainty without a clear
Even on the
framework.
day of her audition,
Still,
she
she
masked her
persisted
nerves with
professionally,
humor,
continuing
introducing
auditions
herself
and
with a joke
performance
that
work
lightened
whenever
the room.
possible.
Few people
Determination
realized
kept
how
her
heavy
moving,
her heart
even as her
actually
body and
was.
confidence
When she
felt
revealed she
increasingly
would sing
fragile.
Tomorrow,
In
the
an effort to
reaction was
regain
immediate.
control,
The
she
song has a
experimented with
reputation
dietary
for
changes,
exposing singers,
including
not
adopting a vegan
protecting them.
lifestyle for several months.
One of the judges
Many
openly
performers
expressed
explore
doubt,
nutrition adjustments to
but
improve
Sydnie didn't
energy
change
and
her
wellness.
mind. The
However,
song
this
carried
shift did
personal
not bring
meaning.
relief.
It was something she
Instead,
had
her
sung as a
symptoms
child,
worsened.
before pain,
Unknowingly,
before
staple foods she
illness,
relied
before
upon were potentially
disappointment.
aggravating her
Singing it
condition.
again was not a
Without a formal
strategy. It was a
diagnosis,
risk.
trial and
What
error
followed
became
was not just a
exhausting.
performance,
The
but a
most challenging
release.
aspect
Years
was
of
normalization.
restraint,
Over
survival,
time,
and
she began to
silence
accept
poured into
constant
her
discomfort
voice.
as
The
typical
room
adult
shifted.
life.
The skepticism
Fatigue, pain,
vanished.
and digestive
When the
instability
golden
became
buzzer was
routine.
pressed,
This
Sydnie
adaptation,
dropped
though
to her knees,
understandable, delayed
shaking.
deeper
It
investigation.
wasn't joy
When chronic
alone.
illness lacks
It was
visible
shock.
markers, it
It
can
was
be dismissed,
disbelief.
both
It was the
externally and
realization
internally.
that after
By her
everything she had
mid-20s, she
lost,
faced a difficult
something had
intersection.
finally given
Career
back.
momentum had slowed
But the
due to
story didn't
inconsistent
end with
health,
confetti.
and emotionally,
For
she felt
Sydnie,
drained.
the live shows were
Yet she
not a
continued
victory lap.
believing perseverance
They were a
alone
test of
would
whether she
eventually
could carry
restore
success
balance.
without losing
The turning
herself
point,
again.
when it came,
Herself
was not
winning
dramatic
without
but
losing
quietly
control.
transformative.
As Sydnie
After
advanced
years of
through the
uncertainty, a
competition,
general
something became
practitioner
clear.
suggested the
Her strength
possibility
was
of
not
gluten
just her voice,
intolerance.
but her
The idea
restraint.
initially seemed
In the
almost too simple
semifinals,
compared
she
to the scale
chose
of her
My Way,
experience.
a song
She was
about
advised to
ownership,
remove
choices,
gluten
and standing
temporarily
by
and
one's
monitor
path.
changes. With
It
cautious
reflected
hope,
where
she
she was
followed the
emotionally,
guidance.
no
Within
longer
weeks, her
desperate to
symptoms began to
please,
ease.
but
Pain
determined to
reduced
be honest.
significantly.
The
Energy
performance was
improved.
controlled,
Mental clarity
fierce,
returned.
and
The
confident.
transformation was striking
Audiences
enough to
responded
feel surreal.
immediately. In the final,
Gradually,
she
she
stayed true to
discontinued
her roots,
antidepressants under medical
performing over the
supervision and
rainbow.
observed
It was not
stabilization in both
flashy.
mood
It
and
was
weight.
emotional,
For the first time
grounded,
in nearly a
and deeply
decade,
human.
she felt physically
When the
aligned with
votes
her
were
ambitions.
announced, Sydnie
Though she chose
Christmas was
not to
crowned
undergo
the winner.
extended testing required
Along
for
with
a
the
formal
title came a
celiac
significant
diagnosis,
prize and a
she
level
committed
of
fully to a
exposure that can
gluten-free
overwhelm
lifestyle.
even the
The
most
improvement
prepared
reshaped her
artists.
understanding of the previous
But what
years.
followed surprised
What she had
many.
interpreted as
Instead of
weakness was,
spending,
in part,
celebrating, or
untreated
chasing instant
intolerance.
luxury, Sydnie
The
did the opposite.
realization brought relief,
She placed the
but
entire
also
prize
reflection
into
on how
savings.
differently her early
Her
career
goal
might
was
have
not
unfolded with
indulgence, but
earlier
stability.
intervention.
After
By the
years of
time her health
financial
stabilized,
uncertainty,
however,
illness, and
professional
emotional
momentum
strain,
had shifted.
what she wanted
The
most
entertainment
was a
industry
home,
moves quickly, and
security,
extended
a
interruptions
future
can
where
create
survival
gaps
was no
difficult to
longer the
bridge.
primary
She found
concern.
herself working outside
She also made
performance,
another
taking a
unexpected
receptionist
decision.
position at a
She
gym
returned to
maintain
education,
financial stability.
committing to complete
There
a
was
personal
dignity in the
trainer
work, yet
qualification.
emotionally it
To some,
represented
it
distance from
seemed
her artistic
unnecessary.
identity.
to
For a
Sydney,
period,
it was
she stepped
essential.
away from public
She
singing
described it as
altogether.
having something
The
solid
voice
to
that
stand
once
on,
defined her felt
just
dormant.
in case.
When she eventually decided
Not
to
a
audition
retreat
for
from
Britain's Got
music,
Talent,
but a
it was not
safeguard
from
against
arrogance or
losing everything
certainty.
again.
It was from a place of
At
measured
the same
risk.
time, her
The
music
show
career moved
represented
forward on
possibility,
her
but also
terms.
finality.
Her
If it
debut
did not
album
reopen
reflected
doors,
her
she was
journey rather
prepared to
than chasing
redirect her path.
trends.
That
She
context
expanded
adds weight to her
internationally,
audition
performing
moment.
in the
It
United
was not
States,
simply a
where her
television
first New York
opportunity.
show
It was a
sold out.
crossroads shaped by
The
years of
success was
unseen
real but
resilience
measured,
and regained health.
intentional. For
Her
someone who
audition
had
song
spent
choice
years
carried
powerless
personal
inside her own
significance.
body,
Selecting a
control
classic piece
mattered.
known for
She had
exposing
learned the
vocal
cost of
weaknesses was a
ignoring
bold
warning
decision.
signs.
Skepticism from
Fame would not
judges added
distract her
tension,
from that
but she
lesson.
remained composed.
Who Sydney
When she
Christmas
began
really
to
is
sing,
now.
the years of
Today,
restraint seemed to
Sydney
dissolve.
Christmas is often
Viewers
described as a
witnessed a
fairy
powerful
tale success
performance,
story.
but beneath it was
But the
something
truth
more
is far
layered.
heavier and far
Relief,
more human.
reclamation, and
She
gratitude
is someone
for
who spent
restored
nearly a
strength.
decade in pain
The
without
golden buzzer
answers.
moment was emotional
Someone whose
not
mental
only
health
because of
collapsed
applause,
because
but
her
because it
body was
validated
screaming to be
endurance.
heard.
Advancing
Someone
through
who
the
nearly
competition
walked away
required
from her
sustained
dream,
focus.
not because she
In
lacked
subsequent
talent,
rounds,
but
she
because
selected
survival
songs reflecting
demanded it.
autonomy and
Her
authenticity.
life now is built
Rather
on
than chasing
awareness.
spectacle,
She
she
follows a strict
prioritized
gluten-free
emotional
diet,
connection.
knowing even
Audiences
small
responded to
mistakes
that
can bring
sincerity.
back the
When
suffering
she
she
ultimately won
escaped.
the competition,
She
it
stays
marked more than
active,
victory.
not out of vanity,
It
but
symbolized
because
return.
movement reminds her
Return
of
to
what
health,
health
to
feels like.
identity, and to a
She
dream she had
values
nearly
routine,
released.
stability, and
This
boundaries,
competition decisions
things she
further
once didn't
reflected her
know she was
grounded
allowed to
perspective.
want.
Instead of immediate
Music is no
extravagance,
longer an
she
escape.
prioritized
It
financial
is an
stability,
extension of a life she
placing prize
fought to
earnings into
reclaim.
savings with long-term
When
goals
she
in mind.
sings, it is
After
not
years of
about
uncertainty,
proving herself.
security held
It is
deeper
about
value than
connection,
luxury. She
honesty,
also
and
pursued additional
survival.
qualifications
She
in
has
personal
spoken
training,
openly about how something
reinforcing
as
a
simple
practical
as
safety
changing her
net
diet
alongside her
gave her
music
life
career.
back,
This
and
dual
how she
focus
wishes she had known
demonstrated
sooner.
balance rather than
She had
doubt.
Sydney is not chasing
Her debut
excess or
album and
perfection.
international performances
She is building
followed,
something
including
quieter
a
and
sold-out
stronger.
show in New York.
A future
Yet
where
even as her
success does
profile
not require
expanded, she
self-destruction,
maintained disciplined
where
health habits and
ambition and
structured
well-being
routines.
can exist
Today,
together,
her story
where
resonates
winning
not
does
simply
not
because
mean
she won a
losing
televised
control.
competition,
And
but because
perhaps
she
that is the
endured
part of her
prolonged
story that
adversity
matters
with quiet
most.
determination.
Not the moment
It
she
invites
won,
reflection on
but
the
the years
relationship
she
between
endured
talent and
without
resilience.
being seen.
Public
So when you
victories are
think about
compelling,
Sydney
but
Christmas,
often it is the
what stands
unseen
out to you
survival that
more?
shapes
The
lasting
victory
success.